Hey everyone, this is me, the Undead Viking, and this is Grid Traveler Magic Journey. Now this is a board game with some RPG elements that is based on a novel called Grid Traveler. Now I've never read that novel, and I actually kind of want to after playing this game, because this game puts you and the other players into this like galaxy, if you will. And you are going to be piloting a space cruiser and running around the different planets, collecting different types of resources that will allow you to cast these different spells. And those spells are very important because they are used not in combat when you're like, you know, two of these grid travelers, like when these two like mages basically meet up on planets, they will like duel to the death. And so you got to make sure you have these good spells and these good abilities so you actually survive those conflicts. Now that isn't the only type of conflict you can have. As I said, you do have these space cruisers that you'll be flying around through space, and if you and another person end up next to each other, you can decide to be buddies and wave and high five as you go by. You can try to trade some goods between the two of you, or you can lock horns in laser space battles in outer space, which that was repetitive, but regardless. So yeah, so it has like those two different elements. It has a sci-fi and a magic element, something that I really liked a lot about the game. So let me go ahead and show you this gameplay. This does feel a bit like a throwback game. This is a game that has player elimination. It reminded me of a lot of games that I played when I was younger, like when I played in my teenage years, in my early 20s, and that's not a bad thing. I am a gamer that's old, if you will, and I do like games that kind of just, you know, harken back to a simpler time, if you will. So let me go ahead and show you how this game is played, give you a little overview, and then we'll come back here and I'll give you my final thoughts. Alright, cool. Alright, so this is Grid Traveler Magic Journey. I'm going to show you how to play. Now, this is a game where you're going to be playing a character. You're a person that is piloting one of these spaceships here in the middle. I should mention also this is a prototype I was sent, so just keep that in mind as I show you how the game is played. And you're going to be piloting one of these spaceships. And it's called Grid Traveler because you can kind of tell that there is a grid here. Now, as you travel, you will be able to move in pretty much any direction you want to go. You can go diagonal, you can go up, down, orthogonally, however you like. Now you might notice that there's these little dots here. These are like grid points where you can actually use them, kind of like wormholes, if you will, that allow you to travel quickly if you're able to make a maneuver check with your spaceship. I'll talk about that in just a little bit when I talk about movement and also the combat that you're going to be getting into. Yes, this is a game of combat. It also is a game of negotiation. There's some trading that goes on, especially when you're playing, because this does handle up to 8 people playing at once, which is a extremely chaotic game, but it's a lot of fun. But this is a game where you're going to be convincing other people to help you out and like track down and beat up on other people and stuff like that. So it is a game of combat and a game of destroying one another, but you know, it does have a lot of interplay between the players. I'll talk about that also in my final thoughts. But regardless, so your whole goal in this game is that you need to travel to, well, besides killing the other people that are playing and claiming victory over the galaxy, is you're trying to get to these different planets around here. And you notice there's these yellow cubes. Actually, I didn't have enough yellow cubes. I ended up with some white cubes over here. But regardless, you end up using these cubes. Those represent the different resources that those particular planets have. And when you're able to get and move your ship over to one and land on there, you're able to, you have to like be in orbit, which is kind of cool. Like, so there's these little spots here. You actually have to orbit the planet once, which I think is kind of neat. And also you can't actually go to the planet unless you enter like the little spot. You'll see these planets have these different locations that's how you get in there. And you even notice that the sun in the middle, you know, has like the spots that you get away from as well. But anyway, once you've orbited the planet, you check your sensors, you try to spelunk the planet, if you will, and then you're able to collect magic. I'm sorry, materials, which are these cards here, and I'll talk about those here in just a little bit as well, that will allow you to cast your different magic spells you have. So this is a cool little combination of both like science fiction, of like piloting these rocket ships and these spaceships, obviously, and having laser battles in outer space, and also a combination of that and a magic system as well. Like your persona, your person, is a grid traveler, and they have these special abilities. And to wit, you will get like one of these cards. There's several of these different cards that have these different people on them, and so these will have. Like here's Nikki, and then she doesn't get any bonus magic at the very beginning, but she gets +4 health, and then kind of has some background there or whatever. She's Chinese, Spanish. Let me just see what the next card is here. Here's Sean. He's +2 magic and +2 health. Okay, so you have a persona, and that's going to adjust your stats that are going to be held on these your little board here, where it has all these different things. Where nanites are like the magic ability within you. And that's constantly refilling, but you use up your nanites to cast your magic spells. Once again, I'll talk about that in just a little bit. And then obviously their health is how strong you are. Down here, I'll hold this up for you. Down here you have your cruiser, your space cruiser, and it has these different components, speed, engine, maneuver, shields, weapons, sensors, and so forth. When you get into space battles, those are going to get damaged, and that's why they have these little spots for them. And then if you manage to escape and get away from the combat, those will repair themselves automatically. You have that power to have that done. You'll notice that over here, there's like this little chart here of like, you can see there's carbon and iron and so on and so forth. Those are the different materials that you're going to be collecting. Now, these aren't used up. So like if you go to, let me just grab a material card here. So like, let's say we go to a planet, we successfully get, and so like maybe you get iron. Oh, there's 2 iron cards actually, but regardless, so you get iron, and once you get that, you're just going to take one of these cubes and you're just going to put that on there to show that you've collected that material. You don't use that stuff up. Now, so like part of like the game is kind of ramping up and getting the different materials that you need that are going to allow you to cast the different magic spells you have. So let me just show you some of the magic spells. So like, they have these things, and then they have the required components over here to be able to cast those. So in order to cast an absorb spell, you need bionite, gold, nitrogen, carbon, and water. Now, when you successfully get like a material from a planet, it doesn't matter what it was. Maybe you'll get the same card. Like I had those 2 iron cards. Maybe you get another iron card you don't need. Doesn't matter if you end up in the same spot as somebody else. You can always trade those things. But anyway, regardless, if you were going to remove one of the cubes off of that particular planet, and so eventually these plants are going to dry up and they're not going to have any resources left. So let me just find another spell here. So like here's creations. That's nitrogen, carbon, and water. Big giant destruction spell, silver, platinum, carbon, and lead. And so you have these different spells, and then when you gain the ability to cast them, you can just go ahead and like, so if you gain the ability to cast destruction, you just put a cube on there showing that you have the ability to do that. And so then you'll be able to use those spells when you end up in a battle with another player. Now, there's 2 types of combat in the game. You have combat that occurs in space when 2 rocket ships meet, and when they end up next to each other, they can have combat. That's also where they can actually just avoid each other. They don't really care, or they can actually just do that trading that I talked about earlier. If 2 people end up on the same planet at the same time, that's when things get really real, and the 2 people can, once again, they can avoid each other, and they don't have to fight if they don't want to. But that's where combat actually starts using that magic component, because then it's both of the grid travelers are not in space, they're not in their spaceship, they're relying on their magical abilities to fight. All right, so I'm kind of jumping around here. I do apologize, but I just wanted to talk about that really quickly as far as those goes. Now, there's two other types of cards that you have. Besides the material cards and the magic cards, and all these cards are possible, materials cards you get from going to the planets, but magic cards, the Ditfoy, or as it says, desperation is the father of ingenuity cards. These are cards that are optional to draw if you want. Now, Whisper cards have a certain thing, like this is Necronian Overreach. Weaken, you have to play the card immediately. All players' magic skills are weakened by -3 for 3 turns. This card not can be placed again. Please place face down. So these are different things that will come into a play, but not all play immediately. So here we have Necronian Help. This card may be played anytime. However, you must play this card at the start of your play or your turn, so to speak. Pick an opponent. They are required to reveal their Necronian to you. This card may not be used for another 5 turns. And so you have these special cards, these Whisper cards, and they'll have it. Now, they mentioned the Necronians, and I should talk about that quickly. So not only do you get a persona, but you also get, and once again, I probably should have explained this to you at the beginning, you also get these Necronians. Now, these are like these godlike creatures that are kind of like your sponsor, if you will. And then they have all these different abilities, and then they also say, like, add 4 million nanites, add 2 to your health, add 2 to your magic. So they're going to give you special abilities, and they're going to give you some extra stats that you're going to be placing upon your player card, if you will. Now, the last but not least is your actual space cruiser. So you also, and these cards, I should mention, they can be, like, you can deal them out randomly. You can deal out 2 to each person. They pick one. You can roll a die and see who gets to pick first. All kinds of different options. You can play however you like, as far as that goes. So now cruisers. Now, one time we actually played it. We said like when the person who got to pick first, they got to pick which deck they wanted. Then the next person picked their deck, and the next person picked their deck, right? And then there was a 4-player game. It was weird. We decided to play it this way. So those people got to pick their thing from both the Necronians, the Persona card, and the Cruiser. But then the 4th player, who didn't win any of those rolls, got to then pick one of their cards after everybody picked their first card. So it was kind of neat. We just messed with it a little bit. They didn't end up winning, but it was fun. But anyway, so these are the different cruisers. They have really cool names: Cruiser 5, Cruiser 7, whatever. I mean, once again, like I said, this is a prototype, so just that's probably why they don't have really special names. But they have these different stats, and as far as weapons and sensors and so forth, like the sensors, obviously the sensors is a good roll because you're rolling a d12 and you're trying to get underneath that. So having a 12 sensors on this one is really good. The move, the speed of it is how far minimum you can go. Because this, when it's your turn, you'll roll a d8, and you'll add that to your speed, and that's how far you can move. The maneuver is your ability to use these grid points. When you end up on a grid point, you have to roll underneath that on a d12 to be able to go and use the grid point for that. And all these things have these different things. Now, you might have these like shields, and shields are like if you get shot in space combat, you got to roll underneath that number to avoid damage. If you don't, then your shields take damage, and they don't take a damage from the 8. They take a damage on your particular card. So you would put a cube on the shields, and then that would slowly climb, and then once it hits 3 possible things, though, it's going to be a disabled shield, and then you're going to start taking damage, like real true damage, to your actual cruiser. And this is a game with player elimination. If you end up fighting like magic to magic for somebody on a planet, you can be killed, and then your game is over. If you end up fighting spaceship to spaceship in the space, you can be killed. Your spaceship gets blown up underneath you. You are in the cold, hard vacuum of space. It's going to end up killing you. Now, you can escape. In space, after you do a combat turn, if somebody wants to quit, they can run away. They get to roll a d12 and move their speed. And then the other person, if they choose to chase them down, gets to roll a d8 plus their speed and see if they can catch up. So, you can escape from combat if things start going sour for you. But, obviously combat can be very deadly. Now, the interesting thing about combat is, so all these different stats here, when it comes time to possibly taking damage to those, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be rolling a d20 and trying to roll, that's a horrible roll for that, I rolled a 19, you're trying to roll underneath the stat of the different component that you have for it to avoid taking damage when it gets attacked. So that's, and it's just kind of like maybe like the structure of that particular component. After the shields have failed, it's possible to save yourself as well. Now, I didn't actually talk about the DIT-FOI cards. Now, this Desperation's father of ingenuity, like these cards are the ability to, and when you're having combat, you can just use the weapons that are on your space cruiser. Each of these cruisers has a weapon capability. They have a stat for it, and some of them are good, some of them are not so good, depending upon what cards you have. But if you have these cards, you can use these instead of using your thing. So here's a sensors disable. You did a crazy maneuver that will attempt to disable the opponent's cruiser's sensors. You play this card during a ship-to-ship combat. Place this card face up next to your cruiser, roll a die, the 8-sided die, or I'm sorry, the D10 die. I apologize, that is a mistake there, that you roll a D8 die. And then if a 1 to 6, you succeed, and then after you roll, you turn the card face up, because these are revealed then. So then, if you'd actually disable, and then disable the sensors and put all 3 cubes on that immediately. And then if you fail, then you actually take 1 point of damage. It's one of those things where, you can use those pretty quickly if you have the right cards to really mess with people instead of using the weapons on your particular ship. Now, I mean, these include also other components too. So like engines. So you take out the opponent's engines. There are also different types of cards. So here's Power Run. You're able to bypass the safety protocols of your cruiser's engines and overtax them. You play this card, and then you roll, and then down next to it means the cruiser can travel. D20 plus cruiser speed plus 10. So you could use that to, escape, if you will. If things are going bad and you think they're going to be able to catch up with you, those types of things. Obviously, a really devastating thing would be to disable somebody's weapons and so forth. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of each turn, if you took damage to any of your, if you had a ship-to-ship combat and you had damage to your engines or your maneuvers or your speed or whatever, you get to remove 1 cube off of any of the things that you've taken damage. So the little repair bots or whatever that you have on your cruiser will slowly take care of that, so you can escape, go lick your wounds, and then come back. Now, combat is a process of you go, I go. So, the person that decides they attack, they choose, in ship-to-ship combat, they'll decide if they're going to use a Ditfoy card or if they're just going to use their weapons. They're going to go through the attack. The other person rolls their defense shield dice. And then the defender attacks back. And then the defender can decide if they want to escape at that point. If they don't, they attack back, and so forth. And you just kind of go back and forth until one person is either destroyed or they try to escape. Same thing happens in combat on 2 people on a planet, not the sun, I shouldn't have pointed that, but on a planet. You are going to be using your different magic cards and using the abilities of those magic cards to attack each other. So, if you have this fireball ability, 3 million nanites per use. Remember, you have a certain amount of magic, and magic does recharge each turn. So, what's interesting about magic combat is usually you have enough health. Depending upon the different stats that you have enough cubes on here, the health, where you're probably not too worried about the fact that you're going to be killed. But one, you can run out of nanites, so you can't really fight anymore because you don't have any good, you can't cast your spells anymore because you don't have the raw power to do it. Because this costs, and remember, you have a certain number of those depending upon your starting, and plus you gain some each turn. So you cast the fireball, cost 3, you roll on your skill level, and then you do 3 damage, 3 health damage. But if you fail, a failed roll means you yourself take 2 damage. So combat between players is very difficult, and you have to feel pretty strong. Now here's the thing. You can team up with people and have multiple people on a certain planet. If they're all there, that's when like a big brouhaha can start up, and that's when that game beyond the game starts happening, and people start discussing, and people start like, hey, attack this guy, attack that guy, attack that guy, and treaties and backstabbings occur at that point to a great degree. So ultimately, it is a game where you are just trying to wipe each other out. There's no scoring track here. There's nothing else. The only scoring track is being the last person left alive in the galaxy, and that means that you and your cruiser and your Necronian sponsor are the last people standing, and you've claimed dominion over this part of the galaxy. So there you go. That is a good overview of Grid Traveler Magic Journey. And let me just talk more about this game and why I had fun playing it in my final thoughts. Alright, thank you very much for watching that overview of Grid Traveler. I hope it gave you a good idea of how to play the game. Now, the rules you can go ahead and you can download them off of BGG. I think you can get them off of Game Crafter as well. I'm not quite sure. But if you want to take a deeper read, if you will. The game has a ton of cards. It has a ton of those different options as far as both the Grid Traveler and the Necronian and the Cruiser. There's tons of different spells. And different things that they do, plus like there's a lot of different variability with those Whisper cards and the DITFOI cards, Ditfoy or however. I mean, it's kind of a neat name for a card. I did enjoy saying Ditfoy over and over again as we were playing it. But regardless, that's one of the things I really liked about the game. I liked the fact that it was a different game each time you played. You were going to have a different combination of Space Cruiser, a different combination of your sponsor and your pilot. All of those were going to be different each time, and they're all going to kind of mix together in a different way. And I kind of like that each one kind of presented itself as kind of a challenge and enough difference so it didn't feel like you were playing the same thing over and over again. Now, I like space games. I really do. I like the idea of piloting your ship from planet to planet, and collecting things. I remember playing. There's lots and lots of computer games I played when I was younger, or even fairly recently, where it had a lot to do about traveling from spot to spot. And from just experiencing and collecting things from that, there's just something fun about that. Like just going to a spot. I love the fact that you had to go ahead and go into orbit around the planet. Use your sensors before you could do it. And just I should have mentioned one thing. You can't just sit there and go around one planet over and over again and collect cubes off of it. And to get you have to, after you've collected one resource off of a planet, you have to then go to another one. Now, that doesn't mean you can't come back later, but you have to go to another planet and successfully get a resource off another planet before you can come back and go to the one that you were just at. So it kind of takes that loophole away and doesn't allow you to do that. I'm sure some of you might have asked that. Ultimately, what this is like I said, the throwback element of it is that it is player elimination. I mean, you are in this game to be the last person standing, and some people are going to be turned off by that. They're not going to enjoy that aspect. But I don't think. I mean, this is a bit of a niche game, if you will. It is out there to appeal to a certain type of gamer, and I am one of those people. I have no problem with people ganging up on me and taking me out. If I put myself in a situation where that can happen, I should get what I got coming to me. It's the game beyond the game that prevents that from happening. You need to be making sure that you are being buddies with with the people around you, making sure you're not making any big waves, and waiting for your moment to kind of spring your attack, and not leaving yourself vulnerable to having somebody plunge the dagger in your back. So there are no specified rules for you know, like partnerships or, you know, truces or whatever. But that's just one of these games where, like, you say to somebody, okay, how about we just focus on taking out Jason right now because he's getting too powerful, and then we'll worry about who's better between the two of us after we get done with that. And so you have those kinds of discussions, and I like that. I like having that ability to have that game beyond the game, if you will. And games like this kind of sponsor that, if you will. Now, ultimately, a game like this either is enjoyable or falls flat because of the mechanics. I felt that this was a good simulation, like a rough simulation, if you will. I shouldn't say rough. I think, and I don't want to say simple either, but this was a game that had a very, very good simulation of space travel, and also like that whole process, as I said earlier, about collecting resources and going through that process as well. I liked using the grids, like to be able to pop back and forth. You can use multiple grids in a turn. Like you can keep moving, so you can move from like wormhole to wormhole to wormhole. You have to go by line of sight, if you will. So like basically the closest one to you, and then you pop to the next one and so forth. Once you fail on a roll to use it, however, you kind of get burped up by the wormhole, and you're not able to use it anymore. But I liked that kind of chaotic element of like you never really knew how far you're going to be able to get on your turn, and so you do have like the whim of luck that kind of affects you a bit, and once again, it's speaking to that niche. I don't mind luck. I think ultimately, like die rolls and things like that, just even out in the end. It is those die rolls and that chaotic element that lends itself to a game like this to have its narrative, to have its story, and ultimately that isn't the reason I'm playing the game. Isn't for having like some very like strict strategy, deep thought thing. I want to have the narrative, the story, the process, if you will, because that's what's exciting to me about a game like this. I like laser space battles, with space cruisers going at it, against one another. I like the fact that when you're getting destroyed and you try to escape, rolling lucky on your escape roll and not having the person catch up to you, I mean, is like a huge thing. It's like it's a wonderful moment, if you will. And those are those signature moments that are enjoyable when you have people flinging plasma balls and fireballs at each other on a planet and dealing, having a one-on-one Magic death match. I mean, that creates a fun atmosphere and a fun aspect of the game. And plus, it doesn't, because the combat is so deadly and because it is, rather brutal, this isn't a game where, like, if you get knocked out, you're all going to stay you all level up kind of the same route, if you will, the same speed. And what ultimately happens is that even if, you get killed and you're knocked out, you're going to have friends knocked out and taken out very, very quickly, because once those dominoes start falling, they fall quickly. And it isn't a situation where it's like you get knocked out and you leave and 2 hours later the people are still playing. No, it's a relatively quick and orderly fashion that other people meet their maker as well, which is a good thing. If you're gonna have player elimination, that should be an aspect of it. So there you go. That is the Grid Traveler. If you have any questions about it, please ask away. I'll be happy to answer those as best as I can. Thank you as always for taking the time to watch this video, and until next time, I'm the Undead Viking, telling you to have yourself one heck of an awesome day. Alright, bye-bye.